Everybody, I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be about fluidity in football. So there's a few different ways you can approach this, but first please subscribe and like the video. That helps an awful lot, helps the channel grow, so that's been super helpful, so thank you for that. And now, so first of all, there's two ways you can look at it, through the defensive fluidity, and then the second would be offensive fluidity. And today we're just going to focus on breaking down the concept, explaining it a little, introducing the idea, and then in future videos we will dive deeper into it and look at more specific examples. So today we're just going to focus on offensive fluidity, but first, what is fluidity in football? So fluidity, in simple terms, it is just the ability for your players to play in multiple roles. And one way I've seen this explained before, it's been explained a few different ways. Probably the most well known is if you think of the structure in two parts. So you have an external structure, which I'm highlighting for you. I'm just highlighting the external structures, the players who make up the border of your offensive structure. And then this will all make more sense in just a minute. So here we are, that's your external structure. And now the second structure is your internal structure. So the player is playing between the lines and penetrating the defensive mid-block, as we've seen on your screen here. So how does this relate to football and fluidity? So you can think of it in two parts: the players controlling the height, the width, and the depth of the structure, and then players making these internal connections. And now we can see creating dynamic advantages by players using interchanges or rotations. So players can come in, inverted fullback, interchange, and the structure is the same. Or when players switch positions, and this would be an example of a fluid structure, players interchanging their positions and still keeping the structure balanced and within the lines of your game model or the offensive concepts you're trying to implement. But positional fluidity can just be a tool to come up with more creative or more dynamic solutions. But the key is that each player will have different qualities. So if, let's say, there's a quick wide rotation between three players, now we have a winger between the lines and a fullback. So this is a basic rotation we see all the time in so many teams, and that's the holding midfielder, or the 8, not the holding midfielder. One of the attacking midfielders, the 8, drops to the outside of the center back, and then this releases the fullback to go high and wide, control the width and the height now, and then the winger operates between the lines. And this is just a basic 3-man rotation. A lot of cues have been involved with this to initiate this movement, but what does this say about positional fluidity? So one thing to keep in mind is now the roles that these players fulfill. And the key thing is your winger, your fullback, and your 8 will have very different qualities. And so now when they approach playing these new roles, they'll bring something different to these roles. So a fullback, so I'll just put some names to it. Let's say Liverpool, for example. Trent Alexander-Arnold, let's say Gini Wijnaldum, and Mo Salah. Now, Liverpool don't typically do this. They might do slight variations, but the roles will be different in this situation. But so Wijnaldum playing as a more narrow fullback, he'll play that much different than Trent Alexander-Arnold, just because their qualities are much different. And now Mo Salah, him playing between the lines, will look much different. He will probably play higher and be more of a threat in behind, which will stretch the space between the lines, and it might allow Trent Alexander-Arnold to come deeper. So the width and the height will now change. And now we can play through more of a wide area. And so then this can lead to a 2v1 against the fullback if, let's say, Firmino pins the center backs to one side. So that was just a quick example. Maybe not the most clear example, but it was an example I just wanted to show everybody on how different players have different qualities, and when using positional fluidity, they bring these qualities to these roles through the team. But I don't really think of positional fluidity in these two structures, just because I think there is a lot more to it than just internal, external. So as we move forward, we can keep this wide rotation just to see the concept. So that was just pretty much positional fluidity, and players can occupy different roles, and even though they don't have the same quality, because no two players are exactly the like type of thing, they can still function in these roles at a proficient level. And a lot of times we see this at Salita La Volpiana, which I've talked about a little bit. When the center backs fan out, the holding midfielder drops. And now, let's say we have a inverted fullback. So now the structure's changed, but we have two holding midfielders, and this shows versatility, which is a big part of positional fluidity, to have an inverted fullback operating. So now we have our holding midfielder narrow and our fullback narrow. So that comes up with a 3-2 shape. And now the fullback is showing his fluidity and being able to operate in this new role. And depending on how man-oriented the press is, we might even be able to manipulate them a little more. Or if the ball was circulated, let's say we attract the press, we draw them to one side, they shift over. With our 3-man, we can now circulate the ball and progress in the half space. And now, in some instances, depends how much we shift it over. If this player now progresses, I know Atalanta are very aggressive with their deep-lying playmakers jumping into the midfield. Now this center back, he will be in the midfield. And so this is just a on-the-ball example of positional fluidity. Kind of something I just like to think about when your center back progresses with the ball and penetrates through dribbling. It's important to consider where he ends up and what his qualities are when he's in these positions. So as the midfield shifts, and now the forwards start to shift, now we have to consider, all right, we have a center back in a deep line playmaking position, so he's now in the defensive midfield line in the half space. So this is quite a position we see a lot of times with the holding midfielder or the 8 we just saw on the other side come into. So now we have to think about his qualities and how he's going to effectively operate on the ball in this position. So that's just one thing I'm going to leave to you to think about. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just a quick one. I'll be making more of these concerning positional fluidity because it's a pretty big topic and we haven't even gone to defensive fluidity. So I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, and I'll see you for the next one.